When Tyler Morrison walked into the conference room for his first day at his new job at 9:23 a.m. on a Monday morning and saw the woman sitting at the head of the table in a designer suit reviewing his portfolio, he felt the ground shift beneath him in ways that had nothing to do with nerves about impressing a new boss or the standard anxiety that comes with starting over at 34 after 8 months of unemployment that had drained his savings and pushed him 3 months behind on rent. The ground shifted because he recognized the face he was staring at, recognized it so completely and impossibly that for a moment he thought he was hallucinating, thought the stress of single fatherhood and financial desperation had finally broken something fundamental in his ability to process reality. Because 3 months ago, on a freezing January night when Tyler's world was barely holding together and his 6-year-old daughter Amara was asking questions he didn't have answers for, questions like, why can't we afford new shoes, and when is Mama coming back from heaven, and are we going to lose our apartment? He'd found this woman, Elena Rivers, though he hadn't known her name then, sleeping in a doorway 6 blocks from his apartment, given her his coat, the only warm coat he owned, bought her dinner with money he couldn't spare from a budget already stretched past breaking, and let her sleep on his couch, because leaving someone to freeze on the coldest night of winter felt like a moral failure he couldn't live with even when he was barely living himself. And now, she was introducing herself as the new creative director of Harrison and Associates, the woman who would decide whether Tyler kept the job he desperately needed or joined the unemployment statistics he'd been fighting to avoid for 8 months while watching his daughter eat peanut butter sandwiches for dinner and pretending everything was fine. Tyler Morrison was 34 years old and had been a single father for 2 years, ever since cancer had taken his wife and left him alone with a 4-year-old who kept asking when mommy was coming home, and a grief so massive it felt like drowning, except you never got to stop breathing. You just kept suffocating while still having to make breakfast and pay bills and explain death to someone who shouldn't have to understand it yet. He was a graphic designer, talented enough to have made decent money freelancing before the industry contracted and clients disappeared, and suddenly everyone wanted work for exposure instead of payment, leaving Tyler scrambling for jobs that paid actual money while his savings evaporated and his landlord started leaving increasingly threatening notes about back rent. He'd been unemployed for 8 months before landing this position, 8 months of sending out portfolios that went unanswered and sitting through interviews where he could see them deciding he wasn't quite what they were looking for. 8 months of his financial situation going from difficult to desperate to the kind of dire where you start calculating whether you can make it 1 more month or if you need to start looking at shelters, because keeping Amara housed and fed matters more than pride. But Tyler was a good man despite the struggles, had been raised by a mother who taught him that you help people even when you have nothing because humanity isn't conditional on convenience, who'd made him promise before she died that he'd teach his own children the same lesson, that kindness matters more than comfort. 3 months ago, in January when the cold was the kind that kills people sleeping outside, Tyler had been walking home from another failed job interview, his thin jacket barely cutting the wind because he'd given his good coat to a coworker whose had been stolen, and Tyler had told himself he'd buy another one when he got a job, except the job never came. 6 blocks from his apartment, he'd found her. A young white woman, early 30s, sleeping in a doorway, dirty in ways that suggested days without access to showers, shivering so hard her whole body shook, clearly homeless and clearly in trouble because it was 14 degrees and dropping, and people don't survive nights like that without shelter. Tyler's instinct was help, immediate and unquestioned, the kind of moral reflex his mother had instilled so deeply it wasn't even a decision, just action. He'd taken off his coat, the warm one he'd borrowed from his neighbor that morning, and wrapped it around her shoulders. Woken her gently, asked if she was hungry, taken her to the diner on the corner and bought her dinner with money he absolutely couldn't spare, money that was supposed to stretch until his unemployment check came through. But suddenly, feeding this stranger mattered more than his own budget. Let her sleep on his couch overnight because the temperature was still dropping, and leaving her outside would mean finding her frozen body in the morning, and Tyler wouldn't let that happen. Amara, 6 years old and carrying her mother's enormous heart in her small body, had given the woman her favorite stuffed animal, a worn bear she'd named Mr. Snuggles, pressed it into the stranger's hands and said with perfect childhood sincerity, "So you won't be lonely tonight." The next morning, Tyler had woken to find the woman gone, the coat folded neatly on the couch, Mr. Snuggles placed carefully on top, and a note written on the back of a receipt in shaky handwriting that said simply, "Thank you for seeing me as human." Tyler had never seen her again, had assumed she was just another person crushed by systems that turned human beings into statistics, had hoped she found shelter but had no way of knowing, had kept her note tucked in his wallet as a reminder that kindness mattered even when you couldn't see the outcome. Now, 3 months later, Tyler was starting his new job at Harrison & Associates, an advertising and creative agency that had finally called him back after he'd applied 6 months ago and been rejected, had somehow reconsidered and offered him a position that felt like resurrection, like maybe his life wasn't permanently broken, like maybe he could give Amara stability again. First day orientation, meeting his new team, meeting his new boss who'd been hired from outside the company and was supposed to be some brilliant creative director who'd worked at major firms in Boston. Tyler walked into the conference room following the HR representative, his portfolio under his arm, ready to make good impressions and prove he deserved this chance, and froze. The woman at the head of the table, reviewing papers in a designer suit that probably cost more than Tyler's monthly rent, with professional hair and makeup, and the kind of commanding presence that made everyone in the room sit up straighter, was her. Was from the note. Was the woman who'd slept on his couch wrapped in his coat 3 months ago. Elena Rivers, his new boss, looking at him with recognition flashing across her face for just a second before her expression smoothed into perfect professional neutrality. "Mr. Morrison," she said, her voice controlled and formal, "please have a seat." Tyler sat, his mind reeling, trying to reconcile the broken woman from January with this polished executive who held his career in her hands, trying to figure out if he should acknowledge her or pretend he didn't recognize her, or what the hell the protocol was when your new boss was someone you'd saved from freezing to death. The other employees in the room, 5 colleagues who'd be working with him, didn't notice the tension radiating between Tyler and Elena, didn't see the way her hand tightened on her pen or the way Tyler's breathing had gone shallow, just saw a normal first-day meeting, a new hire being introduced to the creative director who would determine whether he succeeded or failed. If you believe that the people we help when we have nothing sometimes become the people who change everything when we need it most, subscribe to Love is Kindness. Have you ever helped someone and then encountered them again in completely different circumstances that changed both your lives? Tell us in the comments and let us know where you're watching from. Elena ran the meeting with the kind of professional precision that comes from years in high-stakes creative environments, assigning projects to team members with clear expectations and deadlines, reviewing campaign strategies with the sharp analytical mind that had obviously gotten her this position despite whatever had happened 3 months ago. She was brilliant, commanding, articulate in ways that made everyone in the room lean forward slightly to catch every word. Nothing like the broken woman Tyler had found shivering in a doorway. Nothing like someone who'd needed his coat and his couch and his 6-year-old daughter's stuffed animal to survive the night. She assigned Tyler a major client, a regional restaurant chain looking to rebrand, his first significant opportunity and the kind of project that could make or break a new hire's reputation, and Tyler felt the weight of it settle onto shoulders already carrying too much. The meeting ended after 45 minutes, colleagues gathering their materials and filing out while making small talk about lunch plans and weekend activities, the normal rhythms of office life that Tyler had been locked out of for 8 months and was desperate to rejoin. "Mr. Morrison," Elena said as the last person reached the door, her voice still carrying that professional formality that made the recognition between them feel surreal. "Stay behind, please." The door closed. They were alone. The conference room suddenly felt smaller, the air heavier with everything unsaid, with the impossible circumstance of a homeless woman becoming his boss, with gratitude and confusion and the particular awkwardness of owing someone who now held power over your livelihood. "You probably have questions," Elena said, dropping the formal tone now that they were alone, her shoulders relaxing slightly from the commanding posture she'd maintained throughout the meeting. Tyler stared at her, his mind still trying to reconcile the transformation. "Who are you?" he asked, the question coming out more blunt than he'd intended. "What happened? You were homeless. You were sleeping in a doorway in January. Now you're..." He gestured at the conference room, the expensive suit, the entire impossible situation. This? Elena's confession came slowly, carefully, each word chosen with the precision of someone who'd spent 3 months learning to tell this story without falling apart. I wasn't actually homeless, she started, and Tyler felt confusion spike because he'd seen her, had seen the dirt and the shivering and the particular desperation of someone with nowhere to go. I was having a breakdown, a complete, total mental breakdown. 3 months ago, my entire life fell apart in 24 hours. And I couldn't process it, couldn't function, just walked out into the winter with nothing, because staying in my own life felt impossible. She'd been a rising star at a major advertising firm in Boston, Elena explained, the kind of career trajectory that made other people envious, promotions coming fast, respect earned, future secured. Engaged to a wealthy man named Richard, planning a wedding that was supposed to happen in 6 months, living what looked from the outside like a perfect life, in a perfect apartment planning a perfect future. Until the day she discovered Richard was embezzling. Not from his own company, but through hers, through accounts she had signing authority on because they'd combined finances like couples do when they're planning marriage. Because she'd trusted him completely, and he'd used that trust to commit fraud that was about to implicate her as an accomplice, whether she'd known about it or not. She'd been, about to be charged with crimes she didn't commit, Elena said, her voice tight with the memory. Had a choice. Protect Richard and go down with him, or turn him in and lose everything anyway. Chose to turn him in because she wouldn't, let him destroy other people's lives with money stolen through her accounts. But choosing right didn't protect her from consequences. Lost the relationship, obviously. Lost her reputation because even after investigation, people assume smoke means fire. Lost her career because the firm fired her immediately to protect themselves from scandal. Found herself blacklisted in an industry where reputations matter more than talent. The apartment had been in Richard's name, Elena continued, so she'd lost that too. Her savings were frozen during the investigation, while prosecutors tried to determine her level of involvement, couldn't access money she'd earned through years of work because the legal system moves slowly and doesn't care if you need to eat while they figure out whether you're criminal or victim. One night, after weeks of lawyer meetings and unemployment and the particular isolation that comes from everyone you thought was a friend suddenly not returning calls, she just broke. Walked out of the extended stay hotel she'd been barely affording with credit cards that were about to max out, walked through Boston in the freezing January night, ended up in that doorway 6 blocks from Tyler's apartment, not because she was planning to stay homeless, but because she was having a mental breakdown, so complete she wasn't sure she wanted to keep living. "You gave me your coat," Elena said, looking directly at Tyler. "Your only coat. I could tell it was borrowed, could tell you were cold without it, but you gave it anyway. You bought me food with money that, I could tell from how carefully you counted it, you absolutely didn't have. Your daughter gave me her stuffed animal, this worn bear that was clearly precious to her, and told me I wouldn't be lonely." She paused, her voice breaking. "You didn't ask what I'd done to end up there. Didn't demand my story or judge my choices or lecture me about personal responsibility. Just helped. Just saw another human who needed warmth and food and somewhere safe to sleep, and decided that mattered more than your own comfort or budget." "That night on your couch," Elena continued, tears forming in her eyes, "wrapped in your coat with your daughter's bear and the first full meal I'd had in days, I decided to keep living. Decided that if strangers could show that much kindness, maybe the world wasn't as cruel as the last few months had made it seem. Maybe I could rebuild. Maybe I deserved to try." After that night, she'd gotten into a shelter, Elena explained, called an old mentor who'd believed her story and helped her navigate the investigation, testified on her behalf about her character and work ethic and the impossibility that she'd have participated in fraud knowingly. Eventually been cleared of all charges after 3 months of legal hell, her name restored even if her reputation was still damaged. The mentor had recommended her for this position at Harrison & Associates, called in favors and vouched for her, helped her rebuild a career that had been destroyed by someone else's crimes. She'd reconstructed her life in 3 months through grit and connections and the kind of relentless determination that comes from hitting bottom and deciding to climb back up. But she'd never forgotten Tyler. "I looked you up after I got this job," Elena said. "Used LinkedIn and industry connections. Saw you'd applied here 6 months ago, been rejected. Your portfolio is brilliant, Tyler. Genuinely brilliant. You should have been hired immediately, but you weren't because..." And she paused, choosing words carefully, because the hiring manager at the time had biases he didn't acknowledge. "I pushed for you to be reconsidered. Made your portfolio the first thing I reviewed when I started. Made sure the hiring committee saw your work with fresh eyes." Tyler felt the ground shift again, felt reality rearranging itself in ways that made his success feel stolen instead of earned. "You got me this job," he said, the words coming out flat. Elena met his eyes. "You saved my life. I'm returning the favor." Tyler's internal struggle played across his face, pride warring with necessity, dignity fighting desperation, because he didn't want charity, didn't want special treatment, didn't want to be someone's good deed repaid. "I don't want this if I didn't earn it," he said. "Don't want to be here because you felt obligated." "You're not getting special treatment," Elena said firmly. "You're talented. Your work is exactly what this agency needs. You just needed someone to see it." She leaned forward. "Like you saw me when everyone else walked past. When hundreds of people probably walked by that doorway and decided I wasn't their problem. You didn't know who I was, what I'd done, why I was there. You just saw someone who needed help and decided that was enough." But the complexity remained, thick in the air between them. Tyler's discomfort with the power dynamic was obvious, the fact that she was his boss and he owed her this job while she owed him her life, neither of them wanting debt between them, but both aware that debt existed whether they acknowledged it or not. "This isn't debt," Elena said, reading his expression. "This is humans helping humans. You helped me when you had every reason not to. When you were broke and struggling and had a daughter to feed. I helped you when I had the power to. That's not transaction. That's just how this is supposed to work." "What if I fail?" Tyler asked, voicing the fear that had been building. "What if I'm not good enough? What if I can't handle that client you just gave me? Then I lose the job you got me and prove you wrong and waste the favor you used to get me here." Elena shook her head. "You won't fail. And if you struggle, I'll help you, mentor you, teach you what I know. That's what bosses do. That's what people who care about each other do." Tyler sat with that, with the idea that this woman he'd helped once had become someone who cared whether he succeeded, who was willing to invest in his success the way he'd invested his coat and his couch in her survival. "I didn't help you expecting anything back," Tyler said, needing Elena to understand this before they went any further, before this arrangement between them became something transactional instead of what it had actually been, which was just human decency extended to another human in crisis. "I helped because my mama raised me to help people, because she told me when I was young that you measure your character by what you do when no one's watching and no reward is coming. Because my wife, before she died, made me promise I'd teach our daughter kindness, made me swear that Amara would grow up understanding that helping people matters more than comfort or convenience or whether you can afford it." Tyler paused, then continued with something he rarely told anyone, a piece of his history that carried shame he'd mostly overcome, but never quite forgotten. "Because I was homeless once, when I was 19, before I got my life together. Spent 3 months sleeping in my car after my mama died, and I couldn't afford both rent and her funeral. I know what it's like when everyone walks past, when people look through you instead of at you, when you become invisible because acknowledging you means acknowledging that the system fails people and maybe they could fail too. So when I saw you in that doorway, I didn't see a stranger. I saw myself at 19, and I saw what I'd want someone to do if it was Amara out there someday needing help." Elena's eyes filled with tears hearing this, understanding clicking into place about why Tyler had helped so immediately, why he'd given his coat and his last dollars and his couch without hesitation. "I know you didn't expect anything," she said quietly. "That's exactly why I'm doing this, not as payment, not as debt repayment, as proof that kindness compounds, that it ripples out in ways we can't predict or control. You helped me on the worst night of my life, on the night I was genuinely considering whether living was worth the effort. And you didn't know that's what you were doing. You just knew someone needed help. Now I help you on one of the hardest periods of yours, Elena continued, her voice gaining strength. Not because I owe you, but because I can. Because I have the power to make your life better the way you had the power to save mine, and choosing not to use that power feels wrong. And someday, Tyler, you'll help someone else. Someone who needs exactly what you can give at exactly the moment you're able to give it. That's how this works. That's how kindness becomes something bigger than individual transactions. It's circular, not linear. We help each other in turns, and the world gets slightly less cruel with each turn. Elena leaned forward, her executive presence returning but softened by the vulnerability of the last 20 minutes. Work for me, she said. Do brilliant work. Prove you deserve this job, not to me because I already know you do, but to yourself. Prove that your talent is real and your portfolio wasn't just luck, and you belong in this conference room making decisions about major clients. In return, I'll mentor you, help you build the career your talent deserves, but the industry hasn't given you access to because access is about who you know as much as what you can do. No debt between us, no obligation beyond what any good boss owes a talented employee. Just two people who helped each other at different moments when help was desperately needed. Tyler sat with that proposal, feeling the fear and pride and desperate hope warring inside him, then made his decision the way his mother had taught him to make decisions, by asking what would serve Amara best, what would give his daughter the stable life his wife had wanted for her. He accepted. The work was harder than Tyler had expected, not because the creative challenges were beyond him, but because imposter syndrome is vicious when you've been unemployed for 8 months and convinced yourself maybe you're not actually good enough, maybe the rejections were right and your talent was imagined. The major client campaign Elena had assigned him felt enormous, felt like more responsibility than he could handle, and for the first 2 weeks, Tyler struggled, his designs coming out stiff and uninspired because fear was strangling creativity. But Elena mentored him through it with the patience of someone who understood that talent needs support to flourish, who'd been where Tyler was and knew that breakthrough comes after you stop being afraid of failure. She taught him to trust his instincts instead of second-guessing every choice, walked him through client psychology and presentation strategies, stayed late reviewing his work not to criticize, but to help him see his own brilliance that self-doubt was hiding. And slowly, Tyler's work transformed from competent to genuinely brilliant, his designs carrying the kind of innovation and emotional resonance that makes clients lean forward and say, yes, that's exactly what we need, even if they hadn't known they needed it until they saw it. The client loved his campaign, approved it with enthusiasm that made Tyler's hands shake with relief and vindication, made him realize for the first time in 8 months that maybe he actually did deserve to be here, that Elena's faith in him hadn't been misplaced charity, but accurate assessment of abilities he'd stopped believing he possessed. Tyler picked up Amara from after-school care that evening, his daughter running to him with the uncomplicated joy of 6-year-olds who haven't learned yet to be reserved about showing love, and she asked the question children ask when they care about their parents' well-being. "Daddy, how was your new job?" "Good, baby," Tyler said, lifting her into his arms even though she was getting too big for that and his back would hurt later, but the hug was worth it. "Really good." "Did you meet nice people?" Amara asked. Because at 6, her understanding of work was mostly about whether the people were nice, whether they were mean like some teachers or kind like the good ones. "Yeah," Tyler said, carrying her to their car. "Actually, I met someone I helped before. Remember that lady who stayed on our couch in January? Who you gave Mr. Snuggles to?" Amara nodded, her face scrunching with the effort of remembering 3 months ago, which is half a lifetime when you're 6. "She's my boss now. She's helping me learn to be better at my job." Amara processed this with the straightforward logic of childhood. "Like when I shared my toy with Sophia, and then she shared her snack with me," she said. "Exactly like that," Tyler confirmed, smiling at his daughter's ability to distill complex adult situations into simple truths about reciprocity and kindness. "Exactly like that, baby. 6 months later, the world looked different in ways that would have felt impossible that morning when Tyler had walked into the conference room and seen Elena at the head of the table. He was thriving at Harrison and Associates, had been promoted to senior designer after his client campaigns consistently exceeded expectations, had built a reputation within the agency as someone who could be trusted with major accounts and complex creative challenges. Elena and Tyler had become genuine friends, not romantic, because that wasn't what either of them needed, but real friendship built on mutual respect and shared understanding of what it meant to be broke and desperate and helped by someone who didn't have to help. Tyler's work won an industry award, a regional advertising excellence recognition that came with a trophy and a ceremony and validation that his talent was real and recognized beyond just his employer. At the award ceremony, standing at a podium in front of colleagues and competitors and clients, Tyler gave a speech that went off script from the standard thank yous and industry platitudes. 6 months ago, my new boss took a chance on me, he said, his voice carrying across the ballroom. Gave me opportunities I didn't think I'd ever have again after 8 months of unemployment. What I didn't say then, and what I'm saying now, is that 3 months before she became my boss, she was having the worst night of her life. And I got to help her. Got to give her my coat and buy her dinner and let her sleep somewhere warm when she needed it most. She returned that kindness by believing in my work, Tyler continued, seeing Elena in the audience with tears streaming down her face. By pushing for me to be hired when others had rejected my portfolio. By mentoring me when imposter syndrome made me doubt everything I'd created. This award isn't just mine. It's proof that kindness isn't weakness. It's investment. That the people we help today might become the people who help us tomorrow, not because they owe us, but because that's how humanity is supposed to work. We help each other in turns, and the world gets better with each turn. The after-party buzzed with conversations and congratulations, industry people networking and drinking expensive wine, while Tyler held his trophy like proof that his life had actually turned around, that the 8 months of desperation were behind him now. Elena found him near the bar, smiled the way friends smile when they're proud of each other. You know I didn't give you this award, right? She said. You earned it. Your work earned it. I know, Tyler said, meaning it. But you gave me the chance to earn it. That's all anyone needs. A chance. Someone willing to see past the unemployment gap on the resume or the struggles that don't show up in a portfolio. Someone willing to believe in potential instead of just proven track record. They toasted, their glasses meeting with a soft clink that felt ceremonial in ways neither of them could quite articulate. And then Amara ran up, the flower girl dress Tyler had splurged on for this occasion, already stained with cake frosting and the particular chaos that follows 6-year-olds through formal events. Miss Elena, Amara shouted with the volume control of someone too young to care about inside voices. I drew you a picture. She thrust forward a drawing she'd made during the ceremony when speeches got boring, crayon and construction paper showing 3 figures holding hands, Tyler and Elena and Amara herself, with the words, "Friends who help," written in Amara's shaky letters across the top. Elena took the drawing with hands that trembled, tears forming fresh, because this child's art hit something deeper than professional accomplishment or career resurrection. Hit the truth that kindness creates families that aren't bound by blood but by choice, by showing up, by deciding someone else's well-being matters. Can I keep this? Elena asked, looking at Amara seriously. Yes, Amara said, with the generosity of children who create art constantly and don't yet understand scarcity. Daddy says you're family now, so you should have a picture of our family. Tyler's voiceover came later. Reflection added after time had given perspective on what that January night had set in motion. I gave a stranger my coat on a freezing night because it was the right thing to do, because leaving someone to freeze felt like a moral failure I couldn't live with even when I was broke and behind on rent and barely holding my own life together after my wife's death. She gave me a career because she remembered what being seen as human meant, what it felt like when someone helped without asking what you'd done to deserve help or whether you'd repay it. We don't help people because we expect returns. We help because we're human, because seeing suffering and choosing not to help diminishes us in ways that hurt more than the coat or the money or the couch we give away. But sometimes the universe has a sense of humor about these things, and the person you help when you have nothing becomes the person who helps you when you need everything. Tyler Morrison gave his coat to a homeless woman on the coldest night of January because leaving someone to freeze felt like a moral failure he couldn't live with, even though he was broken behind on rent and barely holding his own life together after his wife's death left him raising a 6-year-old alone on savings that were disappearing faster than employment prospects appeared. Elena Rivers, who wasn't actually homeless, but was having a breakdown so complete she'd considered ending her life that night, never forgot the black single father who saw her as human instead of problem, who gave his daughter's stuffed animal to a stranger because kindness mattered more than judgment, who bought her dinner with money he absolutely didn't have because feeding someone hungry was more important than his own budget. And 3 months later, when Elena had rebuilt her life from total collapse to creative director and Tyler was drowning in unemployment and desperation, she made sure the man who'd saved her got the chance he deserved. Not as charity that diminishes, not as debt repayment that creates obligation, but as proof that kindness isn't transactional. It's circular. That the people we help when we have nothing sometimes become the people who help us when we need everything. That seeing someone's humanity in their darkest moment creates bonds that transcend professional hierarchies and social expectations, and the usual barriers that keep people in separate worlds. And that sometimes the best investment we make isn't in stocks or property or prestigious careers that look good on LinkedIn. It's in the moment we choose to give our only coat to someone freezing in a doorway, trusting that doing the right thing matters even when no one's watching and no reward is coming, even when kindness costs us something we can't afford to lose, but lose anyway. Because being human matters more than being comfortable. We never know who we're helping or who will show up later when we need them most. Have you ever helped someone who later helped you back in ways you couldn't have predicted? Tell us in the comments where you're watching from, and rate this story on a scale of 0 to 10. Sometimes the coat we give away on the coldest night becomes the career we desperately need 6 months later, and the person we save becomes the person who saves us back when the universe decides kindness deserves to compound.